talk is just mainly focused on the climate crisis and its implications for social justice and systems change. But before I look at the implications, I'd just like to perhaps cover 2 points based on yesterday's discussion, something that I do want to add to the conversation and the discussion. The first is the climate crisis as a capture of the commons for profit and the commodification of nature. We all know that the climate crisis physical cause, I would say physical, but because there's social economic causes, is the excessive accumulation of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. And if we look at the commons, as part of which is the Earth's atmosphere and its capacity for keeping greenhouse gas at a level that is safe for human civilization and ecosystems, because we do need greenhouse gases. It is what keeps the planet warm, but it has to be at an equilibrium, and we call that the carrying capacity of the atmosphere. We are saying as well that we all have equal rights to that atmosphere, all people living on Earth. However, under capitalist industrialization, elites and corporations accumulated excessive emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, has actually led to the climate crisis. So in so doing, they use more than their fair share and deprive others of their rights to the atmosphere. And this excessive abuse, again, is what led to the climate crisis. So if we look at these two graphs very quickly, something we've used very often before, the first pie chart represents the blue, which is what rich industrialized countries have emitted to the atmosphere since capitalist industrialization began. And the red part is what, this is the first pie chart, the upper pie chart. The red part is what the developing countries or the poor countries have emitted to the atmosphere. The chart below that is the share of rich industrialized countries to the atmosphere based on population. So you can see that they have actually emitted 3 times more than they have captured 3 times more than their share of the atmosphere as compared to people of developing countries. So we're saying that the climate crisis, one way of putting it, is the capture of one element of the commons, the natural commons, which is the atmosphere, by elites and corporations for the purpose of generating profits. The other point that I'd like to just quickly cover before we go to the implications of climate change on social justice and social protection and systems change is this notion of a green economy. And I put this in quotes because I'm referring to a particular concept that was systematically they started systematically promoting in late 2011 and 2012. One of the means by which was a UNEP, UN Environmental Program publication or a report on what is entitled the green economy. So the main proposition of the green economy approach is treating nature and nature's functions as capital, assigning monetary value and rendering them as tradable commodities. This whole notion, or this proposition, is based on the theory that if we assign monetary value, if we make them as capital, if we treat them as tradable goods, then people will start valuing them, and thus that is the means for protecting nature. But unless in a capitalist system, that's their theory, unless these are treated as commodities and assigned value as capital, then they will not be valued. So that was the whole proposition of that. And it also, at the same time, involved deconstructing different properties of nature and treating each property as separate commodities. So for instance, take land. So this has been a practice for a while now, but it's being further legitimized by the concept of the green economy. So there's the goods inside the land, which is the basis for the extractive industries. There's the land. There's the crops or the forest growing on the land. There is the capacity of the land to absorb carbon. There's the aesthetic element of forests and landscapes. So all these are now deconstructed into separate elements and each assigned a value. There is a website, the URL I cannot recall just at the moment, that is actually talking about future values of these goods or these commodities so that they can be traded. So there's speculation already on the value of these commodities. What is very much already in advance is, of course, carbon trading. So this is along the lines of carbon trading, but this is no longer just about carbon credits. It's about almost every function and value of nature that you can imagine. Just going quickly to the implications of the climate crisis. So right now, the impacts that we are already suffering, and this has had very devastating consequences, as we all know, best exemplified by extreme weather events, is at only nearly 1 degree of warming. So we are now at 1 degree of warming. When I started talking about the climate crisis many years ago, it was below 1 degree of warming. Now we're at 1 degree of warming. So that's just less than, it's only about a little over 10 years. The fact is, no matter what we do today, the situation will get worse. It takes time, even with complete political will, to do enough, no, to stop intensification and start stabilizing the climate. It takes time. So, if we assume full political will of all governments and we do all the utmost that we can do now, immediately, it will still get worse before we can stabilize.
So we are screwed over now. Completely gone.
Not yet. There's a little hope. So, what does that mean is that there are now greater burdens on top of what people are already carrying from economic and social injustice. And economic and social injustice actually renders them more vulnerable to climate impacts. So there's two things there. It's an additional burden to what they're already carrying, because of all the issues we've been discussing since yesterday. You add that to climate impacts, and you add the reality that because of these economic and social injustices, they are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So social protection and social justice has to be redefined given these implications and scaled up to a much higher degree than we have ever imagined before because of these implications, because it's in the face of climate impacts. There's also social needs that were not perceived as needs before, but because of climate impacts, they are now basic needs. So maybe the report on basic needs has also to be re-examined in that light. And because time is of basic, immediate essence, we need to hasten the effort of even securing the minimums. Securing the minimums. We need to hasten that. Now, I go to what does it take to stop the climate crisis from reaching catastrophic proportions. It's already, of course, catastrophic now, but I'm talking about catastrophic proportions with a capital C, which scientists define as not just unstoppable, but also they cannot imagine, because in their current modeling, they do not have the variables to actually calculate what it means beyond a certain point, which they refer to as a tipping point. So the lowest degree of warming that is still possible today, scientists are saying, is 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we want to keep it at below or even just at 1.5 degrees Celsius, because that is only what is possible today. When we were campaigning over 10 years ago, we were saying 1 degree Celsius. Now that's impossible because we're nearly at 1 degree. So now it's 1.5 degrees Celsius. And just between us, among campaigners, we do have to acknowledge, we're not giving up on that, but we do have to acknowledge, given the political situation, this is perhaps a foregone conclusion that we will reach this. Yeah, so this is what is possible given physical limits, but you add politics to the mix, maybe it's no longer possible. What that means to keep it below 1.5 degrees, the safest level still possible, or even 2 degrees, is that we need to fully decarbonize by 2050, meaning all systems on Earth has to be producing greenhouse gases at near zero level. We're not saying completely zero because we don't want geoengineering and CCS, carbon capture and storage, and it's impossible to keep it at zero, but we just, for keeping it short, because what is possible is only near zero, we just say zero, decarbonization by 2050. But it also requires that there has to be equitable sharing of the remaining carbon budget. The carbon budget is what the amount of greenhouse gases we can generate if we want to keep it below 1.5 degrees. And we need to share that equitably because it wasn't shared equitably in the past. So moving forward, the rich countries have to decarbonize faster and bigger. And by our scientist friends' calculations who believe in equity, rich countries have to fully decarbonize by 2030. The rest, because we don't have as much technology and as much resources to do it, we have time until 2050. So that carbon budget has to be shared also equitably. What does that mean? What that means is we need to redefine and reimagine what we mean by social justice and how we deliver on social justice and social protection. Technology has to be low carbon, if not fully carbon neutral. Technology that is required for social justice, services that is required for social justice, has to be reimagined as carbon neutral or low carbon. What does that mean? We need to then imagine what social justice in concrete terms mean given these parameters, and how we produce them needs to also change because production has to be also carbon neutral and or very low carbon. System change. This whole decarbonization by 2050, let us not imagine can happen under a capitalist system. Yes. Capitalism cannot be fully decarbonized by 2050. Capitalism has to be transformed into another system entirely, and that transition has to be fast because the window of time to do that and to still try to hit the safest level still possible in the context of climate change, time is narrow and is rapidly narrowing. Because it doesn't stand still for this task. So the shift from high growth, high carbon capitalism to a low carbon, post carbon, equitable, just social order with a just transition, because it's going to destabilize a lot of things, so we need to secure people's welfare and rights in the process. That needs to happen quickly. So it's no longer enough in our discourse to simply address questions of ownership and control of resources and production. We need to discuss how we produce and what we produce. Not just we need to democratize ownership. We also need to discuss not that benefits will be enjoyed by all, but what kind of benefits are we talking about. And we need to work faster because we don't have much time. We cannot think about the transition as like a creeping transition where we have decades of a chance to do that. We need to even work faster and harder at struggling for system change. Thank you.